It was August 10, 2010, and Viviana Haeger had been missing for 42 days. Both her family and the authorities had done everything possible to find her. But nothing seemed to work until at 7:10 p.m., Jaime Anguita, the woman's husband, called the police to tell them a completely strange fact hours ago. He had begun to smell a nauseating smell in his home, which led him to the attic. There he came across nothing more and nothing less than the body of his wife, in a state of decomposition, wearing the same clothes as the day of her disappearance. When they arrived at the home, located in the commune of Puerto Varas in Chile, the agents noticed something that did not add up before. They had spent 15 days checking the place and never saw the body who had moved it there. Was the answer always right in front of your eyes, the criminalist? The year 2010 was Maria Viviana Haeger Masse, 42 years old, and Jaime Anguita, 52, Viviana, in the exclusive Parque Stoker, in the commune of Puerto Varas, Los Lagos region, located 10 to 14 kilometers south of. He also had two daughters. They were 14 and Susan was 8. At first glance, they looked like a model family. Jaime worked as an engineer in charge of projects at the Puerto Octay construction company, while Viviana had left her job as an accountant to dedicate herself to taking care of the family and the house. Every day the routine was more or less the same. The woman was preparing her daughters for school, then Jaime. I took them there and went to the construction company, but everything changed abruptly on June 29, 2010. The morning began like any other day. Viviana made breakfast for her daughters and helped them get ready for their classes. Then Jaime took them by car to the German school, which was only 10 minutes from the house. I was in a bit of a hurry, so they arrived at 7:45 a.m., earlier than usual. After this, he headed to his work at the Puerto Octay construction company, where he arrived at approximately 8:30 a.m. He went straight to his office, continuing with his routine. Then he was in charge of visiting the different works of Puerto Varas in record time. Something seemed to have sped him up. At 8:08 p.m., he went to the BBVA bank to do a series of personal procedures. I was talking to your bank executive. When he got a very strange call on the other end of the line, a voice told him that his wife had been kidnapped. Jaime didn't worry. He thought it was a simple scam. After 20 seconds, he cut off his cell phone and continued with his life, ignoring the incident. Meanwhile, his eldest daughter left school to meet her mother, but she never arrived. Dismayed, she called Jaime, who did not answer the call. Finally, after several attempts, he was able to communicate and comment on the situation. The man told her to go home alone, and that he would be there in a few minutes. It was 2:30 p.m. when the teenager arrived at the house and noticed that Viviana's car was there with the keys to the house, outside. The situation became even rarer when he saw that the back door was open and that the double bed was completely disorganized. With all his mother's belongings watered, he called his father again to tell him the news. At that moment, Jaime began to think that the call he had received 1 hour ago might not be a scam. He didn't wait even 1 second more. He headed towards the police to file a complaint about the disappearance of his wife. He also placed one in the investigative police to double the help that same day. Both the authorities and the Haeger Anguitas' relatives began the search. Already at night, Viviana was reported under the figure of kidnapping, but the days passed. Neither the police nor Jaime received a call with a ransom demand. In this context, the agents began to suspect that it might not be an abduction on July 5th, a week after Viviana's disappearance. Her husband decided to offer a reward of 5,000 Chilean pesos to anyone who provided true information to find her. I was completely desperate. Together with family and friends, he also led a series of public campaigns trying to collect data that led to the woman's whereabouts, but all efforts were fruitless. On July 7th, the Puerto Varas prosecutor's office analyzed housing bank movements. Reviewing any unusual transactions that could be linked to his disappearance, the case was in charge of lead prosecutor Orrego, who continued to investigate under the figure of kidnapping. They also found the whereabouts of the cell phone of the woman who was in Florida, Santiago, but this didn't lead them anywhere. Witnesses in the neighborhood were interviewed, who claimed to have seen an unknown person near the Haeger Anguita home on the day of Viviana's disappearance. He was a 35-year-old bald person. On 12th of July, the regional prosecutor of Los Lagos, Alberto Ayala, confirmed that procedures authorized by the court would be carried out with telephone interceptions, among others, to clarify the woman Aposte's disappearance. In parallel, the investigative police settled in the Hague Granguita house with the aim of looking for clues that could help find Viviana for 15 days. They toured the 2 floors and the attic, which occupied an area of 350 marmitos. Meanwhile, Jaime stayed at some friend's house, and his daughters went to live with their maternal grandmother. Finally, the man returned to the house with the girls. They went on living, waiting for a miracle to happen. But that would never happen because the sad truth was even closer than the agents thought. On August 10th at 7:22 p.m., 42 days after Viviana's disappearance, Jaime called Commissioner Muñoz of the Investigation Police to make an important statement. He said that day he had smelled a nauseating smell in his house. He started walking to see where it came from and reached the loft. There he saw his wife's body in a state of decomposition. Placed in the fetal position, he was wearing the same clothes as the day he disappeared, and next to him a small box with valuable belongings. While he waited for the officers to arrive, Jaime made a second call, this time to his lawyer. There he notified him that he had just notified the police that he had found Viviana's body, to which the lawyer responded that they would take him into custody. Later, Jaime had to take care of the most difficult part, dealing with his daughters. He asked his attorney to pick them up at school and take them to the house of Monica Haeger, his sister-in-law. Once he was with them, he preferred not to tell Susan, the youngest, what had happened, and tried not to see and hear the news. By then, the TV channels had turned up on the outskirts of Stalker Park because they wanted the scoop of the crime. Sometime later, the first police arrived in the area. These included case managers and area chiefs, including the regional prosecutor. Once inside the loft, they noticed some strange behavior on Jaime's part. The man did not seem visibly affected by his wife's death. Another detail that caught the detective's attention was that he remembered the exact time he had made the discovery. At 6:30 a.m. and 4 p.m. in the afternoon. It had taken 21 minutes to notify the authorities, they also warned. The man had not cried or shown any type of emotion during the 26 seconds that the call lasted. Based on this, the authorities gave an order to the troops. They should not leave Jaime alone for even 1 minute, and they had to interrogate him urgently. The first thing they asked him was about the attic where the body had been found. This did not appear on any of the plans he himself had given them for the search a month ago in response. Jaime said it was a mix-up, since the original plans of the house didn't show that part. The policeman interviewing him doubled down, asked him if he knew about the existence of this place. Jaime stated that he did, but said that he did not remember or keep it in mind. Right after, they investigated the supposed smell he felt before finding the body. The police had not perceived anything when they entered, even those who passed through the small passage that day. Jaime managed to answer that he could give a lot of explanations for this, like that he had been all day with the carabineros in the open air in the mountain range. This would have improved his sense of smell. Despite their suspicions, They had no reason to arrest him. Without finding a clear motive for the crime, they focused on understanding how the body got to the attic. However, the Haeger family had already drawn their own conclusions. Delia Mace, Viviana's mother, spoke to the media and blamed her son-in-law directly for her daughter's death. He said that in the 18 years that had been going on, he had humiliated non-stop, and that was not all. She also pointed out that he had a parallel life with another family. Monica Giga also pointed at Jimmy. He said that the couple's relationship was extremely conflictive, generally due to the man's temperament in the meantime. The first autopsy was being conducted, which the detectives hoped would give some information to the case. On 11th August, the regional prosecutor, Alberto Ayala, announced to the press that preliminary reports from the legal medical service indicated that the death had occurred on the same day as the disappearance. There was no evidence of injuries or trauma attributable to third parties, nor of the use of firearms, short, stabbing, or blunt elements. Nor was there anything to prove that the body had been dragged to the loft. On August 14th, Viviana's funeral was held at the Parque La Esperanza Cemetery in Puerto Montt. Hundreds of people who had participated in the search attended. On October 6th, almost 4 months after Viviana's disappearance and death, a new autopsy report was submitted. It detailed that the woman's death. It could be attributed to herbicide poisoning due to toxins found in his body. During the following months, agents tried to look for evidence to verify the homicide theory that the family defended. Haeger identified and located potential lovers. It was investigated whether Jaime had homosexual tendencies or whether she had affective and intimate deficiencies. However, these investigations went nowhere. On December 1st, the Los Lagos regional prosecutor, Alberto Ayala, said that if no new background was found, the investigation would be closed, and Viviana's death could be classified as a self-deprivation of life. But the Haegers didn't give up. That same month, they filed a complaint for patricide and aiding and abetting self-deprivation of life. In addition, they requested the exhumation of the body to submit it to a new expert examination in February 2012. Their requests were heard by the prosecutor's office. The second autopsy was carried out on March 12th of that year at the Santiago Legal Medical Service. This time the results were quite different. They noted that the cause of death was undetermined and that the body had marks on the wrists and a bruise on the right elbow. That would show that Viviana was tied up and that there was third-party intervention. Nor could the presence of subtle trauma to the head and neck be ruled out. Despite this new information, Naim Lamas, the deputy prosecutor of Puerto Varas, asked for more scientific details. He seemed to refuse to admit that this was not self-deprivation of life. Meanwhile, the media began to use harsh criticism against police officials due to their inability to find clues that will help solve the case. In response to this, on 8th May of that year, the investigative police sanctioned 6 officials for administrative offenses in the investigation into Viviana Aposio's disappearance. Meanwhile, the woman Aposio's family awaited the result of the second toxicological examination, which took a long time. On June 26, 2015, Prosecutor Lamas. He revealed information to the press that completely changed the course of the investigation. He said that according to the report made by Dr. Vivian Bustos, it could be noted that in general terms, there is an established cause of death due to asphyxiation. In addition, the intervention of third parties could be formally affirmed. The family's lawyer, Sergio Coronado, indicated that this report completely refuted the thesis of self-deprivation of life, however. There were no suspects, except for the Haeger family and public opinion, which still turned against the victim's husband. In December 2015, the agents got to work again to get testimonies. They carried out more than 100 statements from Jaime's work circle. Among them were the construction workers. That's how they came up with the name of the person who would change everything. He was Jose Perez Mancilla, a man who had been in a relationship with Jaime Anguita since 1995, the year in which they both began working together at the Puerto Octay Construction Company. On December 7th, Perez Mancilla confessed to having murdered Viviana by asphyxiating her with a bag in his house in Puerto Varas and then leaving the body in the attic. But this was not all. He also claimed to have been hired by Jaime to commit the crime. For a payment of 5,000 pesos, he accepted the offer because his wife at that time had to pay for an operation. However, he declared that he had not received the full sum. The records of the Puerto Montt hospital indicated that said surgery had been performed, and as if that were not enough, that was not the only proof that Perez Mancilla was not lying. The reality is that the man was already on the suspect list because of a key witness. That he had contact with the Haeger family lawyer. That woman told you she met Perez Mancilla's ex-wife. When they were both in pretrial detention in the Alto Bonito prison in Puerto Montt, she confessed to him that her ex-husband was the one who had murdered Viviana. Finally, there was not one, but two suspects in the case, with a lot of evidence against them during the early hours of the next day. Jaime was arrested in Puerto Varas by units of the Osorno Homicide Brigade and identified as the alleged mastermind of his wife's death. Along with him, Jose Perez Mancilla was captured. Haeger's eldest daughter and Anguita publicly defended her father and pointed out the alleged hitman as the only culprit of the crime. On December 11th, the prosecutor's office requested preventive detention for both subjects for a period of 8 months, time in which the case would be investigated. On the 29th of that same month, a reconstruction of the scene of the events was carried out, in which Perez Mancilla participated. Jaime, for his part, was absent. On July 26, 2016, Jaime testified for the first time as a defendant of the public ministry. The procedure was carried out at the headquarters of the investigation police in Puerto Montt and lasted for almost 6 hours at the end. Jorge Ponce is his lawyer. He pointed out that the accused reaffirmed his absolute innocence and denied being the intellectual and material author of the incident, and accused Mancilla of perpetrating the crime and theft of the money. However, some papers were about to prove otherwise. On November 1st, the prosecutor assured that they had found documents in Jaime's cell in the Alto Bonito prison, where he was self-inscribed due to the death of his wife, however. The defense stated that it was completely illegal to use this against him. On December 4th, a hearing was held at the Puerto Varas family court, where it was determined that they lived. Anguita would be in charge of the personal care of her younger sister, who at that time was already 13 years old. He won the custody battle against the Haegers. The case had completely destroyed his relationship with his maternal family that same month. The Puerto Varas prosecutor's office announced the closure of the investigation. The trial would begin soon. On February 10, 2017, Perez Mancilla was hospitalized in the cardiology ICU of the Puerto Montt Hospital after suffering a heart attack. After leaving the clinic, he returned to preventive detention, where he remained waiting for his encounter with the law. On 28th August of the same year, the oral proceedings commenced. The prosecution requested a life sentence for Jaime. After accusing him of patricide and intellectual authorship of the murder of his wife, Perez Mancilla was accused of robbery with qualified homicide. Against all odds, on September 28, 2017, the Puerto Montt Oral Criminal Court unanimously acquitted Jaime Anguita of all charges. Due to the lack of evidence against him, it was not possible to determine his responsibility for the crime or to prove the remuneration promises. The alleged hitman was allegedly promised, his immediate release was demanded. Perez Mancilla did not suffer the same fate. On October 16th, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the crime of robbery with homicide, although the 2 years he spent in preventive detention were deducted after the sentence in favor of his former brother-in-law. Monica Haya told the press that verifying the hiring was difficult, and that is why the thread was cut by the thinnest thing immediately afterwards. He made a strong statement. Now any husband who gets in the way of his wife can hire a hitman. Far from making a mea culpa when he was exonerated, Jaime, along with his daughters, sued the Chilean state for more than $2,000 to repair the damage caused to him and his family. The reason was for damages arising due to the eventual lack of rigor of organizations that participated in the investigation, such as the prosecutor's office. The Legal Medical Service and the Chilean Investigative Police also reported having suffered torture during his time in preventive detention, since they had applied the policy for risk of self-deprivation of life for more than 6 months. He could not sleep with the light off. He was woken up repeatedly at night and had to sleep watched by a gendarme, who stayed next to him in the cell in February 2021. The State Defense Council rejected the claim filed by the Anguita family, accusing them of demanding a disproportionate amount. Given this, Jaime's defense went to the Court of Appeals of Puerto Montt for a second review of the lawsuit, which is still pending in April 2021, 11 years after the murder of Viviana Haeger, the Netflix platform. He announced the production of 42 Days in Darkness, a series based on the case that would also be the first Chilean production in the catalog. It was based mostly on the book You Know Who, Note on the Homicide of Viviana Haeger, by journalist Rodrigo Fuchsa, who also collaborated as a screenwriter. The announcement of this adaptation was not well received by the family, especially by the two daughters, who assured, not knowing exactly what themes would be portrayed in the series or in what ways. Furthermore, they expressed that they had not been consulted for their opinion and version of history. Despite these criticisms, production went ahead. Starring actresses Halin Kappenheim, Claudia Di Girolamo, and Gloria Musmayer. It premiered in May 2022. To this day, the Haeger family continues without justice. The victim's mother and sister are devastated by the resolution of the case, but this is not the only worrying thing. Viviana's crime showed that many cases can go completely unpunished, despite having all kinds of evidence against them, thanks to a judicial system with many shortcomings.